Live, and we're going live right now. This hangout is live on the air as yeah, here we go. Starbucks and water and throat coat tea. I'm ready to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cecil Lammy, and I'm back, and I'm ready to rock tonight on the Audible Live, the footballguys.com podcast. Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Gene Bramwell, the crew is back together as preseason rolls on. And I got to tell you, Bloom, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you here, man. I sometimes I wondered if I was going to lose all of my broadcasting privileges forever if you get me in front of this microphone for too long without any bounds on what I can say. So the form and structure that you... All right, I'm going to have to go ahead and change this because I don't want Cecil to crap up the entire time.
Look at Bloom's
Too late.
Oh,
Too late.
It's too late. You missed
it. They're going to have to go back and watch it again because you missed it. If it's later on, if it's Friday, you can rewind it.
We need Five-ish to screen cap that. He is Matt Waldman, bright new home. And Matt, welcome, man. It's great to be back with you guys.
It's great to have you here, especially with Bloom and his megaphone. You know, I feel like we're waiting for Bloom to like hit the red button on the megaphone any minute here when he's like standing up here, you know, like that. It's got that space age thing going on, so it's pretty awesome. But you kind of have that kind of Mike swag thing going on that you might be able to counsel Bloom on a little bit later.
I like it on my chin. Bloom likes it on his forehead. I'm just saying. And at least we don't have a bullhorn like Alex Jones talking about Bilderberg. Let's talk to Gene Bramwell because he's worth our time and then some. Dr. Gene, you are in tonight.
I am in tonight. I think Bloom needs a trucker hat and one of those little air horns that he can pull down.
I'll be right
As
back.
high as you are up there right now.
Right. Convoy.
Here we got a great big convoy of fantasy football information. Listen, drafts are hot and heavy. It's that time of year again. Preseason's rolling. We got the Hall of Fame game on. We got football on Sunday, and I know it's the Hall of Fame game, but still, it's football, and we get to see something, and it's awesome. And what else is awesome? Fantasy football players championship, and of course. I want you to check that out, myffpc.com. We thank them for jumping on board with us once again this year. I want you to check out the Football Guys Players Championship, and I want you to check out our apps in the App Store. The Dominator app, which is dominating the world in the Google Play and iTunes Store, and our Football Guys magazine with 200 articles to start with, constantly updated. And when we look down the news, I mean, constantly updated is what you need because a lot of things are changing, a lot of things are happening, and let's start in with the news. Then we'll get to some injury discussion. Then we'll get to buy or sell. Then we'll take your Twitter questions, hashtag Audible Live, if you've got some Twitter questions for us tonight as the show goes on. But first up, the holdout has ended for Marshawn Lynch. Matt, I thought I'd toss that one to you to talk about Marshawn. I know Kristen Michael owners now, a little bit of a sad banana there. But Lynch is back in, and really, I talked to Adam Schefter the day this was announced, and he was pretty much laughing about it. He's like, nah, this is, it's going to be a few days, and he'll be back. And guess what? Adam was right.
Yeah, it just kind of came to his senses, basically. Seattle holding firm, and this was one of those deals we talked about last week on the Audible, and the advice was, look, wait a good 10 days and see what happens, because by day 10, if it's still a holdout, then it might be worth considering moving Marshawn Lynch down your rankings. But at this stage, just sit tight. He was in shape. He showed up before this holdout so that he wouldn't incur a fine, and was in shape and ready to go. So I think that this is all more of maybe some misguided advice, or maybe testing the waters a bit, or I'm sure most people will say this isn't the case, but, tinfoil hat, maybe he just needed a little bit of a break and a vacation. He was willing to pay, some extra money in fines to be able to do that.
Well, they said when they brought him back, when he ended his holdout, that they would make some financial concessions to his contract, Matt. I believe that's not paying the fines. I don't know if they're going to give him any gift cards or give him some trade to Trader Joe's or whatever, but financial concessions, Matt, like, that's got to be no fines, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think that it's more of a look, let's not get all rancorous about this. We just won a Super Bowl, and you were a key cog in the past 3 years that we've had of our rise here. Why alienate you when we want to probably retire your number at some point in Seattle for years later? And, next year he might be gone. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with him. The cliff is approaching with Marshawn Lynch. Then again, the cliff has been approaching with Frank Gore, and he still seems to be standing on top of it while all the young little boulders keep falling down into the ocean. So who knows?
Yeah, definitely. And we've got some 49ers discussion to get to, of course, a little bit later in the show. Let's move on to Minnesota and move on to Mr. Bloom, who has changed his super TV terminology. Minneapolis Star-Tribune says they won't be surprised if Teddy Bridgewater starts week 1. Now, we've got kind of a different philosophy for rookie quarterbacks this year. You've got Jacksonville pretty much saying it's Chad Henne, Bortles is going to sit. You've got Cleveland not giving Johnny Manziel any first-team reps, but promising that they will soon, and perhaps use him as a change of pace quarterback. We'll talk about that later. And then you've got Minnesota, where they had the ceremonial first-team reps for Christian Ponder. Those have ended. Now we see first-team reps for Matt Castle, Teddy Bridgewater. I believe all four of us would be in agreement, like, can we just get to Bridgewater getting, like, everything and starting? And I'm, expecting a breakout year for Cordero Patterson. I'll feel much more comfortable about that prediction, Bloom, if Teddy Bridgewater's the quarterback.
Yes, and by the way, I do think that Marshawn Lynch did get a raise out of this, not just no fines. I think he got about $1 million raise. I don't know if the exact numbers have come in yet.
I think what they did was they accelerated his bonuses from next year,
right,
and guaranteed them into this year. So that goes back to what Matt was saying, that in case he is cut next year, that builds in a little bit for him, so that it's not only a raise, but if he's gone next year, he still gets part of his contract from Seattle. It's kind of a win-win for both of them, I think.
Yeah, and I think that what happened with Charles and Lynch is one of the very few things we could say good news for running backs. That if you do prove you're one of the best in the league, then if you bluff just a little bit, we're all married men. Every now and then you're like, I'm feeling a little neglected here, and they were feeling neglected. So getting back to the subject at hand here, I do think we're seeing again, and this has been a trend, and this is something that we should continue to watch because it comes up a lot during the draft, where it feels like quarterbacks, or I didn't say rookie quarterbacks, drafted quarterbacks in the first round just are never going to get 2 years on the bench anymore. It's just not going to happen because of the accelerated schedule for GMs, from coaches that are tied to these quarterbacks, and also the greatly raised expectations for rookie quarterbacks. So I do think, as you said, Ponder's out. They went from 3 to 2 ceremonially. And I do think that Bridgewater has a lot of qualities that we're going to continue to hear things from Norv Turner and from Minnesota saying, well, we don't know why he was there at the end of the first, but hey, lucky us. And now you're even hearing Manziel. There's talk that he's going to get some first-team reps soon. And without any sort of if, I do think that these coaches are under great pressure, and instead of where we would have seen years ago, nice new shiny car, where we might have seen a few years ago, it would have been the smart thing, let's say going back to Aaron Rodgers and Phillip Rivers and that era, that it was the smart thing to err on the side of waiting to start your rookie quarterback. Now I think we're breaking all these ties for the rookie quarterback, and something we have to continue to factor in as we go forward. And that old regime of sitting on the bench for a while helps a quarterback. I don't know if it's true or not, but I don't know if we're going to ever find out.
Bloom, would you say, and maybe it's because I've got zebras on my mind, the officials were out at Dove Valley today, and they did a little press conference, and they showed a little bit of film about the new rules. It's actually, I called it the anti-Seattle rules that are coming. We know that this is a pass-happy league. We know that the rules are geared towards the passing game. Is that maybe why we've seen an ease of transition? Obviously, some very good rookie quarterbacks, okay? It's in talent to the side. But it's also because the game is geared more towards passing, and you don't have to make as difficult of throws, and you're not getting hammered as much as you used to. Because quarterbacks used to get abused. Rookie quarterbacks put on the tape of anybody from your, Todd Marinovich or whoever, these guys getting abused out there. Now they're better protected. They've got more wide open receivers as it's not physical coverage downfield. Is that something that has to do with maybe the rookies looking a little bit better early on?
if I had to pick one thing to help explain this, I would say it's we talk about this a lot, college and pro offenses merging and college concepts becoming more prevalent in the NFL. And in general, the rise of offensive coordinators and offensive minds in the NFL that are willing to say, I don't have a preset system or certain types of holes I'm trying to fill with certain types of pegs. I'm going to look at the pegs that I have, and I'm going to create holes where those pegs fit. So you do have, I think what Kyle Shanahan did with Robert Griffin III is a terrific example of not necessarily doing bite-sized stuff like the Steelers did with Ben Roethlisberger, where you're basically saying, just don't lose the game for us, or like Seattle did with Russell Wilson the first half of his rookie year, but also not just throwing him in the deep end, which is more of what we saw from, say, Sam Bradford in his rookie year, and that's why we were very optimistic, because he swam, sink or swim, he swam. So I think that you're seeing offensive coordinators and in general NFL offensive principals making that transition easier, and not having things like Jay Samaro today saying it's like going from Chinese to English. It's more like going from English to English with more SAT words.
I saw that from Amaro and I was like, shouldn't that be easier?
That's the thing. Like, I saw that and I was baffled. Someone said, is that a good or a bad thing? Like, I'm not a Chinese speaker. I don't know. Can someone out there let us know that has learned Chinese and then learned English?
Well, I've looked into some Mandarin, and it's awful difficult. I can say this.
I knew someone who has learned English whose native language was Chinese, and they said that learning Chinese is probably one of the hardest languages you can possibly learn.
Yeah,
so there you go.
So Jason Morrow is saying that the Jets' offense is really easy to learn and Texas Tech's hard? I don't know.
So not is Jason Morrow not only wrong, but he's also quite dumb.
Yeah,
we'll move
not
on
good at
that.
Metaphors.
Yeah, exactly.
Can he catch?
Literally frying pans for his hands.
Details.
Details. We'll talk about that offense in a little bit. Let's talk about an offense in New York as we transition. And, I know we're doing the hangout, and Bloom and I got together for some pops recently in the Mile High City, had some fun up till about 2 a.m., talked everything from obviously a bunch of football to family and kids and Alexis, Texas, and all the way down, all the way across the board. Everything. What? And one thing is like the video element is great for this show. The one thing I do miss is the Dr. Gene intro. I'll put it in post. So Dr. Gene, just pretend you're coming in with your song as we intro now into some injury news with Dr. Gene Bramall. You can follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall, and make sure you check out Bramall's Second Opinion. Check out footballguys.com, and basically anything that Gene Bramall says, you listen to it as gospel. We are going to start talking about injured players and fantasy owners scrambling if they had plans for David Wilson. David Wilson, a source close to the situation. He's got a neck burner. A source close to the situation told ESPN's Dan Graziano the Giants would be very surprised if David Wilson played for them again. The NJ.com had a source that said they'll need a miracle. Neck injuries are killer, Dr. Gene. I've often commented on the Newswire, Eric Dickerson, Sterling Sharp, Al Wilson, list goes on and on of guys that had to shut it down due to a neck injury. They're so tricky to come back from. It looked like now Wilson has had, even though that he tweeted that he passed all this physical examination and was fine, is there reason to be really nervous about this? Is there reasons to be like, it's a little bit of a bump in the road, but he should be fine? Like, how should fantasy owners be navigating this David Wilson situation?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough information yet, enough specifics about what's going on to be able to speculate accurately. But I think that the quote that you mentioned from NJ.com today, that he's got an anonymous source from the Giants organization saying he's going to need a miracle, tells you all you need to know about where the Giants are with Wilson right now. And I that's very strong evidence to me that they don't expect to be able to clear him, regardless of what his spinal surgeon may say on Monday. And it's not that unusual that he's not getting in to see the specialist until Monday. Schedules with those, high in-demand neck surgeons, spine surgeons. It's possible that the guy's on vacation. It's hard to know. I wouldn't take that as a bad sign necessarily. And it was good that he was out on the field today, at least watching practice. And it's also good that it says he passed his physical examination. But that may only mean that he's no longer having symptoms. But the fact that he had symptoms at all is going to be pretty concerning both to his neck surgeon and to the Giants medical staff. They were very cautious about clearing him the first time. They wanted to make absolutely sure that the bony part of his fusion procedure in his neck was intact and ready to go before they cleared him, so they gave him that extra month. And for this to happen just 3 or 4 days into padded practices is a big concern. Now, whether it's because the fusion itself, if there's something happened to the bones, I doubt that's the case, because I don't think he would have been walking around on the field without some sort of bracing if that was the case. But we've always been a little bit concerned that the stenosis, the narrowing of his spinal canal that was part of the concern last October, whether or not that was fully taken care of by the fusion procedure. Does he have an issue now at a different level of the spine and his neck? These are things we just don't know. But if you've got somebody within the organization saying he's going to need a miracle to get cleared, essentially that's what they're saying, I think that's where we are. Now, does that mean that they may release him and he could get clearance by somebody else? I suppose that's possible if the Giants don't want to clear him. But as we're seeing with Jermichael Finley, and we've seen with other guys in the past, if you've got an NFL team, an NFL medical staff that is reluctant to clear you to play from this type of injury, it's going to be difficult for somebody else to clear you, I think. That's my speculation there. Now, we may hear differently on Monday. He may get a perfect review from his spinal surgeon, and the Giants may say, let's hold you out for a couple of weeks, make sure that your strength and range of motion, everything else comes back, and he's good to go. But at this point, based on what we heard this morning from those sources, you've got to consider it pretty unlikely.
Yeah, you feel for him, honestly. You feel for him because he wants to play. And it just doesn't make it in the cards. It was, it's a sad story. And he did catch and release a bird at practice today. So we did have a David Wilson highlight. Gene, I love
Rocky
this.
Music.
Yeah, right. Gene, I love that we're getting into this time of year because you take the weight for us. Who's going to take the weight? People out there know some old cool in the gang. You're going to take the weight because we hear this injury news start to come in, and the hardest part, I think, is not so much identifying the important injury news to react to. It is tempering your reaction with respect to your tiers, with respect to your board, and not overreacting. And it can go either way. You can step in it and take somebody, like now you've been warned and you still take them, or it could be just the opposite where you get unnecessarily scared off. The two guys I'm thinking of right now, Gene, are Steven Jackson and Cecil Shorts. Both of these guys were definitely high on our these are not guys that we have much tolerance for injuries because of their injury history. They're already being spoke of in terms of Shorts, who had hamstring and calf issues in the offseason OTAs. They're saying severe grade, I think it was grade 2 hamstring strain. With Steven Jackson, we didn't get any specific information except he'll be ready for week 1, we think. We again, like when it's July and the time frame is already talking about week 1. So what is the right reaction here? Is it to move them to the bottom of the tier you had them in? Is it to move them down a tier? Is it to just take them off of your board completely? Because it doesn't feel like that would be an overreaction, but if they're healthy week 1, we'd feel stupid for passing on them in the 13th or 14th round.
Right. So the unknown piece of information here is how are they going to respond whenever they come back from this injury? And it sounds like both of them have mid-grade hamstring injuries and maybe aggravations of things that they were dealing with earlier in the offseason, which puts them in that 4 to 6, and if it doesn't go well, 6 to 8 week range possibly. So I think week 1 is a reasonable expectation for them based on what we've heard. These are veteran guys that don't need to go through preseason practices. They don't need necessarily to spend time in preseason games, but what they do need is to get back into condition and prove that their hamstrings and whatever other muscle injuries we may be talking about with other guys that are held out, like Mike Wallace, who's going to be held out a couple of weeks, that when they come back that they don't suffer yet another aggravation. And there's really no way for us to know the answer to that question. We've unfortunately seen with Steven Jackson in the past that when he does try to come back from these injuries, he's just as likely to aggravate something again than he is to be fully healthy. Maybe they're planning on giving him a couple of extra weeks after he has been deemed fully healthy, and if it was during the regular season, maybe he'd be back in 2 weeks, and giving him 4 to 5 will get him through that period. But again, these are guys that we've seen go through this issue in the beginning of OTAs or training camp or the regular season, as they ramp up their work, they seem like they have these soft tissue injuries. So I would put both of these guys in a category of concern. Where do you put them in your tiers? That's hard to say. I would at minimum drop them to the bottom of the tier that you have them in. But again, there's nothing to say that they don't come back in week 1 or week 2 and put up 14 to 15 productive weeks. I think that's probably a little bit unlikely in Steven Jackson's case, given the fact that we've seen soft tissue strain after soft tissue strain after soft tissue strain with him in the past. Cecil Shortside, both because of age and his history, I think is maybe a little bit more likely to come back. But he's the guy that we know has a mid-grade hamstring injury. It may be that Steven Jackson just has a 1 or 2 week injury. So I would drop them down to the end of the tiers. If you're risk averse, I'd drop them back a little bit further. I don't think it's correct to take them off your tiers entirely at this point, because there's nothing to suggest that they're likely to be on injured reserve, and I think it's very possible that they could come back, recover from this injury, and not have a setback early in the year. But given what we've heard, given the fact that they're not going to participate really in training camp at all, knowing a little bit about their history, I think it's prudent to drop them a little bit at least, yeah.
Gene, so let's talk a little bit about Reggie Wayne. He's recovering from an ACL surgery. Sounds like he looks good in camp, hasn't had any issues right now. He's an older guy. How confident do you feel about his return? What do you need to see to feel like that he's someone that can be moved up a rankings board? And where do you currently have him ranked right now?
I think he's firmly in wide receiver 3 tier for me, and there's some question about T.Y. Hilton and what the Colts are going to do on offense. So I don't know that you necessarily bump him up into that top 20 range, but I still think he has that kind of upside. Andrew Luck's got some more options. Dwayne Allen will be back. Hilton's got another year under his belt. If Hakeem Nicks is healthy, that's a good sign. Maybe Trent Richardson's a little bit more productive this year, so I think that offense should be a little bit better. So I think Wayne could produce. It's possible that he gets 80 to 90 catches and gets closer to, and can approach double-digit touchdowns again. What do I need to see? I think I've already seen some of it, which is he's been able to get through consecutive practices and multiple consecutive practices without any of these soft tissue injuries that we're seeing so many other of these skill position players and wide receivers in particular go through. I would like to see that he's got that little bit of extra gear that he's had in the past, or can change direction. Well, I don't know how much of that we'll see in preseason. I can't imagine we'll see that much of Reggie Wayne until pretty late in the preseason games. But I think, I've been looking at him. I've been able to get him as a wide receiver 4 in the 7th, 8th, even 9th round in some leagues and mock drafts recently, and I think there's a lot of value in that range for him, because I don't know that I believe that T.Y. Hilton is the number 1 wide receiver on this offense. So hopefully he'll continue to be healthy through the next couple of weeks of camp, and we'll see him moving well on the field, get a couple of good looks at him in his first couple of preseason games, and feel even more comfortable about him in those last couple of weeks of August.
Dr. Gene Bramall, of course, leading medical expert and football expert as well. It's a great combination, and we're so happy to have him on this show with you, the Audible Live, each and every Thursday night. Dr. Gene, my heart is heavy. We obviously, all of us, fall in love with players that we really enjoy, we really want to see succeed. One of those players is Marcus Lattimore. For me, with the 49ers. I've told the story before, talking to him at the Combine, joking around with Goodell, when Lattimore was still in college, about letting him in the league early because disaster struck. And 2 major knee injuries, it doesn't sound like, they've already got LaMichael James to deal with, Kendall Hunter to deal with. Carlos Hyde, fantasy owners, certainly like how he's gotten an elevated fantasy stock now, but Lattimore, it's just everything you read, everything you see. Matt Mayako, Matt Barrows, 2 of the best. Bill Williamson out there as well. Nobody's reporting anything good about this guy. Kind of give us a sit rep on Marcus Lattimore in your eyes.
Yeah, I wrote in my Pup Takes article about a week ago about players that were on PUP and players that were not on PUP. For the most part, a lot of the guys that we worried about, from Gronk to Julio, even to David Wilson, they didn't spend much time on PUP, if at all, and those were good signs. Unfortunately, that's not the case with Marcus Lattimore, and he went on the non-football injury list, which is something that players go on when they really haven't been able to take any football-related activity yet. And yes, there was some, it's just a little bit of a mild hamstring injury, and yes, he's still dealing with some of the lingering effects of his knee injury, but I don't think either one of those things should be minimized. One, if they're still concerned about any leftover effects from the knee injury that's now been almost 2 years from the surgery that he had, I think it was October or November. We're going on 24 months now. That's still got to be a concern. And we know it was a devastating injury. We know it was a catastrophic type situation that he was going to have to work hard to recover from. But if he's still having some lingering effects of that, you have to wonder about whether or not he's got a bone-on-bone cartilage condition, whether or not he's got the range of motion or how well he feels the stability of that knee is. That's a concern. And then the hamstring injury, if in his first efforts to get back and really condition hard after this knee injury, he's already got a soft tissue strain, and they were kind of minimizing that, but he's still not been taken off PUP, a good 7 to 10 days after they've put him on it now. That would make me worry that it's more than just a low-grade injury, and maybe it's something that he's not going to be able to recover from quickly. It'll set him back through camp, and even though Michael James and Kendall Hunter aren't there and the door is open for Lattimore to not only make the team, but maybe get some snaps. And if he's not ready to go, that's definitely a concern. So I think, can we be a little bit optimistic that he'll be back at some point in camp? Yeah, I think we can be, but he needs to get off PUP. He needs to start practicing, and he needs to be going through consecutive practices pretty quickly. And there's never been any indication from the end of last year where we hoped we'd see him start to take some snaps through this offseason, and now with him still being on the NFI list, that's going to happen.
Gene, I want to talk Aaron Dobson, because first I want to put this all in context, because I do think that we've seen some cases over the years now, Sidney Rice comes to mind, where if you parse the words or the uncertainty, the open-ended nature of comments, then you already have these situations on your radar as possibly going the way this one has gone. I want to go back to Aaron Dobson back in March. Early March, it was reported that his stress fracture had not healed. So in other words, they were trying to get through it without him having surgery, and they had reported on March 3rd that if he didn't show progress in the next week or two, he was going to have a procedure, a quote-unquote procedure. He had the procedure about a week later. And then we saw in June and in early July that, there's optimism he will be ready for training camp. When, as it was originally reported, this was probably a 2 or 3 month rehab, that there should have never been a question about training camp. And that was another sign when wait a second, why does we even need to be optimistic about camp? This happened back in March. Now we have the official news that he had a permanent screw inserted in his foot. It has just now started to run very recently, has not been seen doing any cutting. And today we even saw that reports that he was running sideline to sideline with the trainer clocking him in his rests. So I guess the question here is, how does that change Dobson's short-term and long-term outlook? Is this something that maybe it's more appropriate in this case to take him off the board? And does, of course, we're going to be watching guys like Kembrell Tompkins, Josh Boyce, Brandon LaFell as it relates to this. So this is one of those cases where the players come back to camp, we get some news that changes it, but how much?
Yeah, I think it changes it significantly, this situation. And Dobson was a little bit under the radar until we found that he had just started running. I don't think the reports that his bone popped a little bit or that he decided not to have surgery until March are necessarily concerning in the same way that Jonathan Stewart or other guys would raise your spidey senses in the past, because it would seem like this injury is similar to what guys like Marcus Colston, Ahmad Bradshaw, Keem Nicks, Julio Jones, Cody Lattimore, Safarian Jenkins, all these guys have been going through, where there's a screw being put probably through that fifth bone in the bottom of the foot there. And those things, as we talked about last week with Julio Jones, we know from Dr. Anderson's studies that a lot of these guys get better right around that 12-week mark. Sometimes it's 8 to 10 weeks, sometimes it's closer to 14 to 16, but it usually within that time frame, 12 to 16 weeks, if not a little bit sooner, they're able to do just about everything they should have been able to do. So to hear that Dobson at about the 4-month mark, so somewhere between 14 and 18 weeks from his surgery, was only just really running hard at that point, it makes you wonder, did he have a setback in his recovery at some point? Why is he more delayed than the other situations that we think are similar in the past? It's a good sign that he's running. Maybe he's just a couple of weeks behind, and by the end of the training camp he'll be at full strength, but we don't know what his setback was. We don't know if there was something different about this procedure. Didn't seem to be anything to suggest it was different in the reports leading up to this week, so definitely there's some concern there. Again, it's another situation of what tier did you have him in to begin with. If you thought that Dobson was a wide receiver 4 and somebody that you wanted to target between the 8th and the 10th round as your priority depth, I don't think you can count on that anymore. Julian Edelman's having a good offseason, very good camp so far. Danny Amendola is, at least for now, healthy. Gronkowski is coming back healthy. Shane Vereen looks good. I know those guys don't fill the role that Aaron Dobson might fill, but there are other guys on that roster. You mentioned Boyce and Tompkins that could fill that role as well. So Dobson's going to need to get in there, prove that he can hold on to the ball, prove that he's got some chemistry with Tom Brady again. And if he's not able to do that through these training camp practices, then he falls down the depth chart a little bit. And I think at that point, whether it depends on how deep your rosters are, because he would be kind of a priority waiver wire person for me at that. I don't think I would put him on my roster as a wide receiver 5 until we see him get through practice and hear that he's doing well.
So let's talk a little bit about Jadeveon Clowney and get on the defensive side of the ball here. And yeah, exactly for us IDP folks. So let's talk a little bit about, they say that he's, looking good in practice at moments, and there's lots of hype about that, but also that he's not fully healthy yet. So what should you expect from Jadeveon Clowney this preseason and maybe early this season?
Well, I want to see what he looks like. There was the sports hernia procedure that he had. A lot of guys will get back within 3 to 6 weeks from that, and he was able to do that. So it shouldn't be too much of a concern there, but he's got some ankle stuff going on. Not really sure what's going on with those issues. There's always been some concern that it was something that he needed to have surgery on to correct, that he's got some impingement in that ankle. So you just wonder if he's going to be ready for every down duty as the season starts. So is he able to play 30 snaps, 40 snaps, 50, 60 snaps? Now, Clowney's a guy as good as he is. If he's explosive enough in those 30 snaps that he can still be very effective on the field, and he could be productive from a fantasy standpoint. It's a good sign that he's able to practice as early as he is in camp. He's got lots of productive players around him that can shield him a little bit. They may not be able to, offenses may not be able to focus on him because of J.J. Watt and if Brian Cushing is healthy and some of the other things that they're doing along that defensive line. So let's see how he looks in preseason games. Let's make sure that they've cleared him to play in preseason games and see what level of explosiveness he has. I'm also curious to see if we see him pull up a little bit on that foot like we did from time to time in a South Carolina tape over the past couple of months, his last couple of months at South Carolina. You could see him kind of pull up. A lot of situations where he looked good, but a lot of situations where he didn't seem like he wanted to finish the play because he felt a little something in that ankle. And how long will they let that go? If that becomes a little bit more often, is it something they might push surgery on during the season, or will they be content to wait until the end of the year? And again, that's kind of projecting out a little bit, but let's see what Clowney looks like during the preseason games, and we'll have a little bit better idea of how many snaps and how productive he can be.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night here on Google Hangout with Cecil Lammy, Gene Bramall, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, and as I get ready to drink my tea, I am teabagging right now. So I'll sip on some tea, but first I want to continue the defensive discussion, Dr. Gene, and I want to ask you about Quantera Smith. Quantera Smith is a player that was lining up with the first team in practice today, opposite DeMarcus Ware. The interior line was not Terrence Knighton. It was Marvin Austin and, of course, Sly Williams. Now, they're rotating. They're looking at some things. But one thing that they've been looking at, certainly, is Quanteras a lot, in a big way. And I have a segment called Pump the Brakes or Hit the Gas. Pump the brakes or hit the gas. Hitting the gas on Quanteras might be the direction that I go because he beat Winston Justice in the pit. Okay, it's Winston Justice. Who cares? In team drills, he made Ryan Clady look bad. I mean, that's the only way to put it. He made Ryan Clady look bad. So hit the gas, pump the brakes, Quantera Smith. And again, teams have found some value with these players that are hurt, and then you draft them when they're injured. Certainly, Tank Carradine, Quanteras, Dominique Easley this year. So you look at the situation I'm telling you about Quanteras being back, making Clady look bad, that's pretty difficult to do. Is it some value here with Quanteras and coming back from that knee injury that he had at Western Kentucky, Dr. Gene?
Well, I think Bloom, was the first one to kind of turn me on to Quanteras. I hadn't watched him carefully until Bloom called me a couple of times last year leading up to the draft and said, "What do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy?" And I think Smith I think the question for me with Smith would be not necessarily will his knee hold up, but is he going to be productive enough on early downs? Is he going to be able to play the run well enough to be more than just a situational pass rusher? Not that situational pass rushing is, and it's often, and I think anyway, an underrated part of playing defense. Those guys who, the nickel snaps have gone from maybe 30 to 40% of snaps in a sub package to now as much as 60, 70, 80%. So when we say a situational pass rusher, that player may still be on the field for close to 700 snaps. And if it's Quanterra Smith with his edge rushing ability, and I think he showed a pretty good mature array of pass rush moves at Western Kentucky. If his knee allows him to transition from one pass rush move to the next, and if he's beating guys like Ryan Clady this point at camp, if he can keep that going, then between, maybe you put Malik Jackson and Derek Wolfe there on base downs and let Quanterras work into the mix a little bit. But if Quanterras starts showing that he can play the run, then they're really going to have a nice player there, and he's going to be, he may be, once DeMarcus Ware moves on a little bit, he's going to be the bookend to Von Miller. I like Quanterra Smith a lot. We've seen many players come back from ACLs, both college and pros, and if he's got that former explosiveness back that he showed on tape a couple of years ago, and he's already proving that to Ryan Clady, the Broncos are going to have a nice player on their hands.
And Cecil, you do remember Quanterras' big game of his college career, right?
Alabama.
And who was he lining up against?
DJ Fluker.
Twice a year, baby. That's going to be fun.
Go. Yeah, and he told me, by the way, Bloom, before you ask Dr. Gene the next question, he told me today after practice he lost his technique last year. Because I said, DeMarcus, it was his birthday, but DeMarcus was out there and back on the field from the thigh bruise, minor thing, and he was showing him some stuff. And I was like, what was DeMarcus showing you? He says, well, I lost my technique. So he was using spin and rip, and DeMarcus was showing him some swim stuff and some bull rush stuff. So as Dr. Gene alluded to, multiple pass rush moves. The burst is definitely back, and it's fun to watch, that's for sure.
It was definitely, go look YouTube, guys. Go to Draft Breakdown. Check out that game if you want to see what he can do. As Gene said, a very wide array, a very mature array of pass rush moves, tactics, sequencing moves. He does have some sand in his pants, too. I think he can be a two-way, and I certainly have him on some of my IDP teams. Gene, players that I'm trying to decide if I want on my redraft teams. And again, this is more of a general question, and I understand that some of this is a case-by-case basis, and these aren't all going to be the same. You brought up Mike Wallace. There's also Pierre Garçon, also Kenny Stills, who has a quad, not a hamstring. But again, we have these receivers with soft tissue leg injuries. They've all been out for about a week now. We don't know anything specific about how they got hurt. We haven't got necessarily timetables, although I want to say I heard that Mike Wallace missed maybe the first preseason game. Again, when do you start to adjust your board? Is it time to do it already? Is a week enough? I mean, none of these guys, Garçon, Stills, or Wallace, they're not Miles Austin. So we don't have like a special case for them. These are just your typical receivers that have, as far as we know, no bugaboos, no skeletons in the closet about long-term injury issues. So about when, if it's a week from now, and I'm asking you this question again next Thursday night, Gene, Stills and Wallace and Garçon, do you start to break ties against them within a tier? How much weight do you give this?
I don't give it much weight at this point. Now, if it was Miles Austin and we were hearing that he wouldn't be back for 4 to 8 weeks, I mean, that's a perfect example to give. Somebody that's had the same injury over and over and over again. I just had a question on Twitter. Is there such a thing as hard tissue? We keep talking about soft tissue, and by soft tissue, you just mean muscle. I mean, you can throw ligament and tendon in there too, but hard tissue is bone. Okay, so when we talk, and I'm using soft tissue just as because we're keeping this generic for now. Once we get into specific injuries and specific timetables where we're trying to decide week 1 or 2 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out, then we'll be a little bit more specific about this is hamstring, this is calf, this is quad, and why one might be more difficult to recover from than the other. But for now, we could, for lack of a better word, we could say these are conditioning injuries as much as they are soft tissue injuries to me. So it's just kind of a generic term. It's not necessarily a throwaway term, but it's just meant to encompass all kind of muscle strains that these guys, these skill position players, as they start to really let things go for the first time and try to go 100% of what they're able to do, how well those things hold up, because they really haven't stressed themselves out quite in that way. Probably not, just because it is not, we talk about this a lot, it is not getting up to 100% or more of your cardiovascular ability and being in cardiovascular fitness and conditioning shape is not the same thing as putting your body in awkward positions and asking it to respond to a hit from an unusual angle, a little bit of a funny step where you're in pads and your body is taking hits from unexpected angles. So it's a little bit of a different situation there. So you mentioned Mike Wallace, you mentioned Pierre Garçon. I'm not worried about those guys yet because it's awful early in the preseason. We don't really see these guys take extended, and last year was a little bit different. We saw some teams do it more in the second preseason game than the third or the fourth preseason game, and some do it in the fourth rather than the second or third. But I just want to see these guys back on the practice field toward the end of the preseason consecutively. So next week, if Mike Wallace isn't on the field, well, it tells you that it wasn't a cramp, that it wasn't a little bit of soreness. But it doesn't tell you that it wasn't just a low-grade injury, that if it was the regular season that he wouldn't have played 60 to 70 snaps and got his usual targets or not. We don't know that information yet. There's really no reason for them, despite what we've seen with Arian Foster this week, for a lot of these teams to put somebody out there who is a vital part of their offense but has some soreness in that muscle that would predispose them to having an additional or an aggravated injury going forward at this point. So Mike Wallace is a little bit different category, I think, because they're already saying we're going to hold him out for a couple of weeks. So that maybe raises a little bit of a minor red flag. Could this be more than just a low-grade injury? But it's too soon to know that for certain. So again, depending on what your risk tolerance is or what you thought of Mike Wallace's ceiling, if you don't think Mike Wallace has a wide receiver 1 ceiling, then bump him to the end of that wide receiver 2 tier because he doesn't have the ceiling that matches the risk at this point. But again, this is yet another reason for those of you guys who are trying to make redraft decisions today, and I know that happens with some of the high-stakes leagues, and there's some advantage that you can get in that, but we're dealing with incomplete information, and it's just simply too difficult unless somebody comes out like the Cecil Short situation and tells you that he's got a grade 2 injury without seeing exactly how it happened on the field, without knowing what the imaging studies, without the team giving you more specifics. All you know is that the team is showing some caution, and whether it's a 1 to 2 week injury or really a 4 to 6 week injury, we're just not going to know until we get to that 3 to 4 week time frame. So at this point, next week there's still not going to be much in the way of preseason games. So if we're not practicing and we're missing the second preseason game, then I'm going to get a lot more bugged than I am today.
So before I get to my question, Gene, you talk about hard tissue. I think that if the Kleenex company were to make something for Gene Bramwell, it would be hard tissue because we know that how tough Gene is. Fortunately, we did not have the hangout when Gene was doing his broadcast from a hospital bed. That probably would have not made it very far. But yeah, hard tissue by Kleenex.
I think a lot of people, the nurses, the doctors, the insurance companies, probably would have had a problem if I had a laptop on my lap while I had do you really need to be there at that point? A phone is one thing, but a laptop with a webcam.
Yeah, probably not going to work. So anyway, in terms of the question, a lot of guys I'm seeing on the newswire being diagnosed with concussions in camp. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like that we're seeing a lot more of that now. Now that we're a couple years down the line from a heightened awareness of head injuries. Tell me about either, I would think obviously that there is a heightened awareness about this and that they're enforcing, staff to kind of check out players that seem kind of dinged up in practice and exhibit any types of signs of a potential concussion. But tell me about, as a fantasy owner, when you see guys walking off the field getting diagnosed with concussions at this time of year, does that change your thoughts about them in terms of what's going to happen at the beginning of the season? Are you dropping them down your draft board?
No, but I'm making a note of it. So if I'm breaking ties, as Bloom likes to say, I might make a little bit more note of it. If it's a player that I know has had at least one concussion, certainly multiple, but one concussion in the past that has another concussion during the preseason, you have to wonder if teams are going to be a little bit more cautious with them if they sustain another concussion later in the season, more so than if it had been there first. The other thing that would bother me at this point is if they don't get back onto the practice field within 7 days. This isn't like a here I go with soft tissue again. This isn't like a hamstring strain or a shoulder separation or something like that, to where, if a team wants to take an extra week with the veteran and make absolutely certain that they're healed and that there's no soreness left over, that's not the way a concussion works. When the symptoms are gone, it's fine for these guys to be back out on the field. Yes, they are maybe a little bit higher risk of having a concussion. We don't know exactly how much, but when the symptoms are gone, just like in the regular season, these guys are ready to go. So if we see, like Carlos Dunlap was a good example last year. He didn't get back within 5 days. He didn't get back within 7 days. It stretched on to 2 or 3 weeks. That would definitely heighten my concern if we saw that with a player. If Jordan Reed or Wes Welker had a concussion in the preseason, yes, that would be a major red flag for me for how soon they're going to be able to come back. Would they miss any time in the regular season? And if they got another concussion in the regular season, what that would mean for the rest of the year. But what I would most pay attention to is how quickly they get back on the field and what their past history has been.
He is Dr. Gene Bramall again, fantastic, at Gene Bramall on Twitter. Make sure you check out Bramall's Second Opinion and check out footballguys.com. Dr. Gene, grab you some throat coat tea and take a little bit of a break while I do what we call a live read in the industry. You've been kicking butt in your local league for years. Will this be the year you take the next step and enter the world of high-stakes fantasy football? The 2015 FFPC main event is the most prestigious event in season-long fantasy football, and it's breaking its own records with over $2 million in prizes, including a monster $300,000 grand prize. After online from the comfort of your own home, or join 1,000 diehards just like you and come to Las Vegas, where you can experience the live in-person draft, parties, and special events at Caesars Palace during NFL opening weekend. Simply go to myffpc.com to find out more about all our leagues and contests to fit all budgets and interests. That's myffpc.com. FFPC, the home of high-stakes fantasy football. And we transition now into our buy or sell. Now, Dr. Gene, you're free to jump in at any time. You can cut any one of us off at any time to let us know what you think. But in buy or sell, I'm going to toss out some topics, and then we're either going to buy it, we agree with it, or we're going to sell it. We're going to let it go. And reports coming across about Indianapolis. Now, for those that don't know, my daily show now, woo, thank you. I always make fun of Pep Hamilton because he has a great young quarterback in Andrew Luck, and it's like he doesn't know it because he's stuck and mired. And I love power football. I was raised on power football. I would appreciate if the league was power football, except for just a small handful of teams. I get it. I understand it. But you've got Andrew Luck. There's nothing to cover up. Let him go. Now, it seems like, from an ESPN.com report, that Andrew Luck will have, quote, plenty of opportunities to throw the ball this season. Andrew Luck, as great as his talent is, he had 23 touchdowns as a rookie, 23 touchdowns last year. In order to take that next step, get him to 30 at least. Nobody's getting crazy and saying 45 or whatever, but just get him to 30 touchdowns and let him sling the rock. And yeah, when it's not working with the ground game, just turn your quarterback loose. One of the best young quarterbacks in the game. Of course, the return of Reggie Wayne. We've got some new news items on him. And I point back to the Kansas City playoff game, where Andrew Luck was 29 of 45, 443 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Could we see more of that, minus the interceptions? Can we see 40 passing attempts per game? Can we see him, 300, 350, maybe 400 yards passing? Can we get that mixed in a little bit more because of that talent there? Oh, yeah. Talent at the wide receiver position with Reggie Wayne coming back. Talent at the tight end position, of course, with Dwayne Allen, healthy, ready to go. Kobe Fleener running around as a reliable target. Hakeem Nicks, if he's healthy, ready to go. T.Y. Hilton. I mean, look at where the strength is. Sorry, Trent Richardson, the strength isn't there. Ahmad Bradshaw, all right, it's just not the strength of the team to play power football. The strength of the team is to let Luck go. Let him sling it. So as we start buy or sell, I'm going to tentatively buy that there would be, quote, plenty of opportunities. I still have my doubts and reservations about Pep Hamilton, realizing who his quarterback is and what he can do. and doing what Bruce Arians did, man. And I know Bruce Arians only got 23 touchdowns at him out of a three-vert system that Luck had never run at Stanford. Under Pep Hamilton, ran a more conservative offense. So tentatively buy Bloom. Are you buying or selling the fact that we could see Luck unleashed this year?
Selling. I mean, I'm definitely not buying. I'll tell you that. Here's the thing: you're ranking your quarterbacks. You're putting them in tiers. Obviously, Luck is not with the Breeze and Rodgers and Peyton tier, and I think that Luck is above the others, but above the others in the sense of Romo and Kaepernick and Wilson and so on. He's somewhere in that tier with Matthew Stafford. Maybe you think Nick Foles belongs there. Maybe you think Cam Newton belongs there. Depends on your philosophy. Matt Ryan might belong there. The question is Andrew Luck somebody that should make you bite where you're not going to take a quarterback in the first 3 or 4 rounds, but maybe it's worth it to not wait? And we get into the assumption of rational coaching, because the rational coaching here is, especially, you added Hakeem Nicks, you've got a healthy Reggie Wayne that's going to be back, you've got another pass catcher back in Dwayne Allen. Luck is the most talented player on your offense. The running game not doing well. Now Donald Thomas, the guard, free agent guard they picked up last year, he's out for the year again. They have to put Jack Muert, the rookie, in there. We'll see what happens. It seems rational to unleash Luck. But I just think that, look, you don't get to be a coordinator or head coach in the NFL by just when someone says, I think you're wrong, you should do it this way. Say, oh, okay, sure. That's just not the kind of personality that becomes that's not what you've heard for your whole career. Okay, we already know that that's what Pep Hamilton wants, and I just think that it's not fair to assume that this trend's going to reverse because of one playoff game when they fell behind by 21 or 24 points. I want it to happen. I want to see it. Another thing that we're watching early from camp in Indy, a lot of 2 tight end sets. And remember, this team went tight end in the second round, tight end in the third round after they went Andrew Luck. I think that you're going to still see 2 tight end sets. Now, the interesting thing here is the 2 wide receivers in these 2 tight end sets are, of course, Reggie Wayne, who we talked about during Gene's segment, and T.Y. Hilton, not Hakeem Nicks. And Hakeem Nicks has gotten some snaps in 2 wide sets in place of Wayne. He's gotten some snaps in 3 wide sets. So I do think that Hakeem Nicks is someone we have to look at a little askew now. And I think that this idea that they're just going to unleash Luck and open up the offense for him is premature. I don't think we've seen scenes of it. I think it's seen signs of it yet. I think it's aspirational. I think it's what we want to happen. But I think that if we were to make a list of the top 5 ways that the high information fantasy football player gets burned, it's by assuming rational coaching and assuming, well, it's what should happen, so it's what's going to happen. And I'm not buying into that. And also, by the way, I want to say that I like this new regime where Gene can jump in whenever he wants. And I almost feel like we should make a game out of it where if you say something that makes Gene jump in, you get a point. And we can just keep track over the year and see who provokes Gene to open his mouth the most.
What if he jumps into?
That's one. That's one for me right there. I got one.
Already keeping score. He's significant, ladies and gentlemen. But what if Gene jumps in to chew you out? I totally disagree with you.
Doesn't matter. Exactly. It doesn't. They all count the same. If you just
get double points if I jump in, but I'm muted when I jump in. It looks like I'm talking, and I'm so excited that I forget to push the mute button before I jump in.
I like it.
There we go. A new game on the Audible. Matt Waldman, buying or selling? You've heard the arguments for both sides, and again, assuming rational coaching is a dangerous thing. Do you live life on the edge with Pep Hamilton?
No, I don't actually. I mean, I've got Andrew Luck rated where I'm still kind of mixed at this point, because where I have Luck in my tiers right now, let's see. I have him 10th overall, so I would say that's probably I would say the answer is no then, because I don't think unleashing would be he's going to be an elite quarterback in fantasy football. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he can approach, he can be in the 44,000, 4,300 range. He can be in the 30 touchdown range possibly. Total touchdowns, I would say maybe even would be a closer bet. But again, you have to see whether or not this team is going to be able to put it all together and stay healthy. And whether you like Trent Richardson or Ahmad Bradshaw, you can't really like that offensive line when it comes to the run game. And I still want to see Reggie Wayne fully healthy and on the field before I believe it. That's why I asked Gene that question earlier. And you look at these options, and I think that there's certainly a lot of hope there for them. But at the same time, it's just a situation of how they're going to use these players and whether or not Luck is going to be running for his life. And it's going to turn into the future Ben Roethlisberger, which to me is a very talented quarterback capable of elite production if he was put into a situation and maybe a little bit more mature and focused in Ben Roethlisberger's case to really elevate his game. I think that Luck obviously has the maturity and I would even dare say the intelligence factor over Ben Roethlisberger based on what we've seen off the field to be able to say that Luck has that edge. But he also has to run for his life and be, kind of Captain Chaos and kind of Roger Staubach-like in the sense of the way that he does things. And when you're having to make the incredible, make an ordinary play look incredible, an 8-yard pass or a 12-yard throw, that should, the effort that he put into it should have been, a huge play, a game-changing type of play. Those types of plays get old pretty quick, and it's going to be the type of situation that it could really end up hurting Luck's stats down the line and his ability to stay healthy, and eventually he's going to wear down. So I look at this team, and I think he's in danger in year 3 of being in a disappointing situation, even though you look at all these players, the skill players on the surface, and it looks really promising. And I'm a Hakeem Nicks fan, and I think that he is someone that to watch out for, and I certainly think he's a value. I drafted him in a mock that we're writing up this week. But when you look at Pep Hamilton, this doesn't seem to be a great fit.
The debate continues about Andrew Luck as buy or sell continues, and we'll go from a talented quarterback entering his 3rd year to a controversial but talented rookie quarterback. And Browns quarterback Johnny Manziel, Mike Pettin says he'll get some first-team reps pretty soon. And you also hear that he's a gamer. And these things do happen, okay? And not just with guys like Tebow, which I know Manziel, there have been comparisons in terms of athleticism, not anywhere near throwing. Don't say it. It's not true. But there are players out there. Chad Pennington was a gamer. He was terrible in practice, and he'd come out, he'd look pretty good in games. So a game-time situation, perhaps we see Johnny Manziel thrive, and that's why the Browns are considering essentially a change of pace quarterback. I don't even want to say quarterback by committee because Hoyer will be the man for them. Many expect Hoyer to begin the regular season as the starter. So long as he stays healthy and productive, then he'll stay the starter and keep Manziel on the bench, but you can't keep him down for that long. And the team is going to be very tempted to get his athleticism on the field. We've discussed the change of pace quarterback before, which we've actually seen in the NFL. We've seen rotational quarterbacks per play. Craig Morton, Roger Staubach, Sean Moore, Tommy Maddox, Steve Walsh, Troy Aikman. Those are the 3 examples that come off the top of my head. 2 with the Cowboys, 1 with the Broncos. We've seen it before. It never works. But Manziel, buying or selling this fact that he is going to be a change of pace quarterback, perhaps to start things off. Blue, I'm going to start with you here. I do want to throw out the number that in 7-on-7 drills at training camp, this is from ESPN Cleveland, he's unofficially completed 42 of 85 passes. That's 49.4% during 7-on-7 team drills. And, say what you will, practice, all that. Just know, for anyone that's not familiar with 7-on-7, there's quarterback can't get sacked. It's all passing, and it's geared to so that you're very successful passing. That's what it is. It's a passing drill. It's wide open, and it's spraying it all across the field. 49.4% is terrible in 7-on-7. And I'm not saying it has to be 100%, but 7-on-7, he should be in the 80s. 49.4 it's terrible. And again, rookie, whatever, ease him in, first team reps coming pretty soon. the buy or sell is about change of pace quarterback, but I just wanted to throw that in there, Bloom, because, well, that's just what I wanted.
Yes, but let's also remember that Cam Newton was horrendous in his first preseason. I mean, people, and this was all set up by the Gruden quarterback camp thing, where he's like, he can't even name one play that he ran. He can't name one play. So, I mean, I think that you said it when you said gamer. I mean, I'm not really going to judge too much now of Manziel's long-term future on his first few 7-on-7s. I'll say this. It's smart for the Browns to make everybody think they're going to do this. I think they need to show it in the preseason, and you're going to gain a lot of tactical advantages. You're going to take up practice time in the week to prepare. During the game, even if you don't intend on having Manziel run the play, when you send him out there, you're going to probably milk a timeout. You're going to put them in disarray. If they don't take a timeout, then you're going to be able to have a defense that's not quite sure what to do. So I do think that it makes sense for the Browns to give every indication that they're going to have a change of pace quarterback, and that Manziel is going to come in at any time, the same way that Slash would come in, or any number of quarterbacks we've seen this. It makes a lot of sense, and for them to maybe even once every 3 or 4 weeks in the year do it, because you want every team going into every game thinking about it. So I think that this makes a lot of sense. I'm buying that they are selling it to everybody out there. How much they'll follow through could be based on how well Manziel performs on the plays in the preseason, and how confident they feel about being able to pick the exact right moment for those plays. 2-point conversions, 4th downs, things like that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I like the play on words there, Bloom. Mr. Provocateur. Matt Waldman, buying or selling Johnny Manziel as a change of pace QB?
I'm selling it, and listen, Bloom is a former lawyer. I'm a former operations manager. As a former lawyer, he's going to give you all the fancy-dancy strategy of what you might want to do in mind games that you're going to play on people. But the operations manager in me says this: Johnny Manziel thinks that he was smart enough to be able to learn the playbook a little faster than he did, with a little less work, with a lot more martinis and club bathrooms and whatever else he was doing with Rob Gronkowski and the rest of, all those hotties in Vegas that he was with. So basically what ended up happening is I think he approached this like he was in college. I still think he's very, he's a cocky quarterback, just like Jim McMahon was a cocky quarterback, or Brett Favre was a cocky quarterback and showed up hungover in Falcons practice and had Jerry Glanville ready to have a conniption fit on a regular basis. I think Johnny Manziel's the same guy. He tests the limits on the field. He tests the limits off the field. He's getting burned right now. The Browns are embarrassed about this. They've already talked to him multiple times, and they don't want to say the guy hasn't studied hard enough, the guy hasn't worked hard enough, because if they do, Cleveland is going to have a conniption. If you think that they've reacted about LeBron James the way that they have over the past few years and what's going on now, imagine that, what happens now with Josh Gordon gone or on the verge of going, and then the guy that they pick, that they pass up Sammy Watkins for, and a whole host of quality players, isn't working hard enough, and they already knew that he had a reputation for that. So I think that Johnny Manziel can turn this around, but the operations manager says in me that they're giving him these opportunities because, A, they're not sure if Johnny Manziel is the type of player who is ever going to really work all that hard, but may be extremely talented on the field. So we might as well throw him out there and give him a shot in some set plays here and see if he can actually show something that is worthwhile to us. Or, at the same time we throw him out there, and if he completely is just horrible and unprepared, then he's going to get the message fairly quick, because we're going to be riding with Brian Hoyer the rest of the season, and he could be our third quarterback for all we care, which is, I'm sure that we could see, that possibility with Cleveland's coach, the way that he's kind of talking tough. The Browns brass is probably like, look, I know you probably aren't happy with this guy, but he's our first pick. We need to give him a chance here and let him do what he needs to do. And I also think it's just a matter of just a young guy getting broken in, basically. And he's the type of guy that's kind of that wild stallion who's going to have to be broken, and he's going to resist, fairly hard. And I'm sure that Cecil can give a better analogy of that than I, since I grew up in apartments all my life and he was the one on the ranch. But, I rode horses here and there in summer camp, so maybe I knew a little something about it.
Let's rope and ride Broncos. Yeah, you have to halter break them first, then you drive them, then you saddle break them, then you try to ride them. And that's where you get bucked off. Where will the Browns get bucked off? Bloom, any retort to what Matt was saying there about Johnny Manziel? And by the way, Johnny Manziel in an interview said that he'll forget words sometimes in plays.
Right.
Because the NFL playbook, and I don't have access to Mike Pettine's playbook, but an NFL playbook and the play calls themselves are, 7-8 words. And they're all about, states or colors or cities or whatever, which means this way or means that way. And each saying, each word will tell someone else something different to do. If he's missing some words, there are going to be some guys that have to improvise. Josh Gordon there, maybe that's not as big of a problem because he's that type of player that could help out an improvisational quarterback like Johnny Manziel. We love young baby Hawk, but you would think of him as more of a precise, tell me exactly what to do, and I'm going to go execute it exactly as it is. So anything to say in reaction to Matt?
Nothing in reaction to Matt, although I do want to say, since you brought it up, the fact that NFL play names are 7 or 8 words long is absurd. And it's just this like detritus that has built up of all of these offensive geniuses needing to put their fingerprints on everything. And there's just no reason that you should need to communicate what a play is that complex.
They're all on TV now, though. They're all on
Yeah.
TV. They're not on the field. They're all on TV doing shows right now. And I will say this about Manziel, just one last thing, just to bump in there, is that Manziel is 49% completion percentage. That's just a product of a player who is not integrating the mental skills with the physical skills, because this guy has been throwing a football probably before puberty, and he probably knows enough about mechanics at this point to be able to do a fairly decent job if his mind wasn't swimming with what he had to figure out. And the fact that you're talking about that he's forgetting words in the playbook shows that. So he's probably just combined with the vacation time, the fun he's been having, the trouble he's been getting into, and the issues that he has to face with the media all the time. It's just been one giant distraction for him, and it's probably showing up on the field right now, and he needs to get that together.
He needs to get it together if the Browns want to get him into the lineup. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. We're hanging out. We're just hanging out here on Google. I'm Cecil Lammy. I'm back. I'll be gone next week. Sorry. Broncos are playing against Seattle in a meaningless preseason game. I know people trying to hype it up as otherwise. But
Meaningless? It was the preview of the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, and Seattle didn't think it was meaningless because they beat the shut your mouth out of them, and of course forced Ronnie Hillman to fumble. By the way,
It was a good day.
I know I've had people ask me on Twitter. I know that someone in the Shark Pool is probably posting about this now as we speak. When's Lammy going to come in and tell us about how great Ronnie Hillman is? Hillman, and there's a report, I think it was Leggy or Kliss or something, he fumbled his first carry in team drills the first day pads were on. So does he look good in practice? Yes. Pads come on, and he's fumbling, and anyway, so there's my update. I'll tell you more about C.J. Anderson and Monte Ball later, and about Cody Lattimore later too. But it brings me to a back that with New England is Belichick's praising him. There you go. Hang on to that rock. 4 points of pressure, Matt. 4 points of pressure. Don't slap it away, and don't knock your microphone out of place either. 4 points of pressure. James White, a 3-down back or no? Buying or selling this? Now we all know White's game. We've all watched White plenty. Of course, saw him down at the Senior Bowl. Good kid. Waited patiently for his turn behind Monte Ball, and then he got his chance to show what he can do. I described him like this. I almost described him as a Jonathan Franklin type, where he's efficient in his motion. He doesn't waste. He doesn't waste motion. He's not going to take false steps. He's not going to not know where to go. He's determined and he's intent. He's not very big, okay, and that's the problem. Where between the tackles, he's never going to be a pile pusher. I like the fact that he'll eke out. He'll get skinny. He'll get as much as you possibly can out of a carry up the gut. But he's best used in space. Like him as a receiver out of the backfield. And again, not an elite athlete. Now he's getting rave reviews from Patriots camps. All the Patriots beat writers rave reviews about James White. So we like to go on current information, match it to what we know from his college game, what we know from watching the film, see him at the Senior Bowl, etc., and then kind of make a determination there. Is James White a 3-down back? Well, I'm buying that, but I'm going to add in this addendum. Never 3rd and 1. Okay, never 3rd and 1. Now you've got Ridley. Talk about fumbling issues. Ridley's there. Vereen is a hell of a talent. Lots of injuries, seems to be constantly banged up. Is there something here with James White? By the way, he jumped on the board, Bloom. On the board now, an average draft position. James White in 12-team PPR leagues now way down at the bottom, but he's finally there at running back 64 in 1406. So fantasy owners already, the gears are turning if this happens. Ridley fumbles and Vereen's hurt. Could White be something here? Much more than a Kevin Falk role. What's the deal with James White? I'm buying the fact that he's a 3-down back, but I'm throwing in the addendum that you'd never put him to push the pile on a 3rd and 1 or a goal line situation. But your thoughts here, Bloom, and how fantasy owners, obviously they're reacting. He was not getting drafted a week ago. Now he's barely getting drafted, but those savvy sharks at the bottom, they're anxiously waiting.
And they should be. And that's what I'm buying, is that you need to pay more attention to James White, and he could do more than you might have thought whenever you saw him come across the board as a pick in the 4th round. And I'll make a rough comparison here to Pierre Thomas. Pierre Thomas is a little bit bigger, a little bit more explosive. I think James White is a little bit faster. I think that you can have a same sort of role where maybe you aren't going to use him, like you said, on short yardage, or you're not going to use him to grind down defenses, but you can use him in your hurry-up offense. You can use him in a lot of different situations. He can be a good receiver. He can be somebody who is a dependable back. And as we talked about on the preseason watch list, Cease, this team is good at running the ball. This team is good at producing fantasy value in the backfield. Now, it could easily be that we see Vereen and Ridley and White take turns of who has the best fantasy weeks. But again, with Ridley's fumbles, with Vereen's injury history, I think you absolutely could see White playing a role. Now, is White enough of a talent that when Vereen and Ridley miss time, that the Patriots say, "Whoa, we don't even need those guys"? No, I mean he's again a Pierre Thomas level talent. That's not to put him down at all. It's just to say that he's not going to seize the backfield, but he is somebody who's going to do everything they ask him to do and do it competently, if not well. So I think that he has to be on your radar. He's somebody that if you're doing rookie drafts in August, by the way, Matt, you're on the clock in the RSO rookie draft, then you have to look at him a lot differently than you did a few months ago.
Well, Matt, before I toss it to you, I do want to bring up his size because I mentioned it at 5'9", 204. I like that he's compact. Again, he's not a banger, but he's compact. Bloom and I did preseason watch list on and talked about Devontae Freeman, who I've compared to a Maurice Jones-Drew-like prospect. If you're not the biggest guy, I don't want you 5'11", 200 pounds. If you're 5'9", 200 pounds, a little bit crunchier, a little bit crunched together, that's better in terms of less to tackle when you get low and show that balance. So thoughts on James White here, Matt?
This is my thought on James White. It's a rearview mirror. Basically, he's the type of guy that he is a good enough back that he's going to be able to see the field if they need him. But every year that he actually gets to contribute, he's going to be looking in that mirror at the guy riding up behind him on the depth chart to overtake him, because that's basically what he is. He's like a Nissan on a highway full of muscle cars. Okay, it's just not really something that I look at. He's a smart player. I think he's a tough player. I talked to him at the Senior Bowl as well. I really liked his personality. You could tell he's a guy that could be in the league an awful long time. Terry Kirby was in the league an awful long time. Now, he was not the same type of player as James White. He's a different physical type of guy. But I don't see him as that special player. I have him more compared to Edwin Baker. He was kind of the guy that I have him compared to, which is a lot lower than Pierre Thomas. I mean, I don't know. I've got something going on with Bloom right now where I'm like just taking umbrage with him. It's the microphone envy. I think that's what it is.
It is.
It's the microphone
because that Nissan can still get you from place to place. I agree with you that you don't want to be driving a Nissan as your primary car, but sometimes if you need a ride, the Nissan can get you there.
But here's my problem. You just compared Pierre Thomas to a Nissan. I'm sorry. I know that maybe I like Pierre Thomas. Yeah. A Hyundai? Yeah, I think I can go with a Hyundai. I can do that. I know that the general manager might have an issue with that because he thought it was a Mercedes, back during all those pro days that we were talking about back then. But we won't go too far into that because Cecil's eyes are getting wide and bugging out of his skull. So we won't go there.
We're talking cars, but Bloom got that reference. I was like, Bloom, do I have to walk you through the reference because you're not a car guy? But you know, you're right. The Nissan will get you there. By the way, if this was terrestrial radio, we'd all be calling, guys, could you come to the office and bring everything in your desk, please? Never make fun of a potential sponsor. So Nissan, we love you.
And even when you were Dobson, I loved Dotsons.
Oh, my dad had a Dobson. He had a Dobson 240Z. That was one of his favorite little deals until he got rear-ended. But hey, that's the way it goes. So.
Yeah, that's the old rotary engine. Don't start me down this path. I'll start talking about carburetors and horsepower and all that. It is the Audible Live. Dr. Gene getting close and personal there. Can't wait till he bumps in here because I believe we're going to talk about Cincinnati next. And Gio Bernard, we're about ready to get to your Twitter questions. So those of you that have been hanging on, thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out footballguys.com. And we love you guys. We couldn't do what we do without all of you. And the way I put it was this. I was interviewed, of course, everyone talking in Denver about the change up to the lineups. And, yes, I'll make it about me because, well, that's what it is. And in that interview, and Bloom was one of the first ones to really open my eyes, but every follower matters, every like matters, every retweet matters, every interaction matters, okay? How did I get a daily radio show besides knowing a lot about football? It's having that following. So all of you out there that follow all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you, because that matters. In the eyes of business, that matters, to have your eyes on what we do. So we thank you for that very, very much. Now, after that,
on that note, I want to take another moment out to say that our man Jared, who has been on the show, who's a great friend of the show, Jared from Mentor, won the Cleveland 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland Fan Phenom competition. I think he will get his own weekly show or something like that on Cleveland Sports Talk Radio. And honestly, it's something that I was rooting for. I've been watching him go to the round of 16, round of 8, round of 4, round of 2. He's a big supporter of us. We're a big supporter of him. And we love hearing about what's going on with everyone out there. And we love to celebrate in your victories, whether they be fantasy football victories or life victories. Savor them because, it's what keeps us going.
Jared's got Football Guys Inc., man.
Yeah, he's got a Football Guys tattoo. He's got the football. He's got a Black Eye Joe tattoo. So I'm just saying, Black Eye Joe tattoo radio show. Just saying.
1 equals t'other, as Dan Reeves would say. Dan Reeves loves words like t'other and pert near, and that's why I love him. Let's move on and talk about, some old school football. The Reeves reference works because Dan Reeves' playbook didn't have 8 words. It had 3 plays. Run, 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 punt. That's 4, but still. So Dan Reeves' playbook, Hugh Jackson taking a page, the only page, out of Dan Reeves' playbook now in Cincinnati. I will get there eventually, about running the football. And we hear the reports coming out of Cincinnati, and this is something we've heard about before, and fantasy owners very curious. There's some rookie running backs who came in and they messed some things up. The Zach Stacy owners are like, well, how much is Trey Mason getting? Well, that's actually Benny Cunningham, who's working a little bit. I talked to Tony Softly about Benny Cunningham. They're kind of holding Trey Mason back a little bit right now. So, the Stacy owners, they're a little bit more secure now. But the Gio Bernard owners, Gio Bernard is having an outstanding camp. This is no surprise to any of us here. There is talk now, Hugh Jackson, this run-heavy system. They got Jeremy Hill, and that, kind of messes some things up. Hill's a favorite of mine in this draft class, one of the few backs that I've pegged with star potential. But they're saying 300 touches. That's the word, Bloom, not carries. 300 touches, perhaps coming, maybe, possibly, for Gio Bernard. This is from Bengals running back coach Kyle Caskey, hinted at 260 to 300 touches for Gio Bernard this season. He had 226 last year. And in this offense, which is going to lean more heavily on the run, when you have that big playability, the receiver out of the backfield, just everything that Gio Bernard is, it's got fantasy owners certainly excited about his prospects. Right now, Gio Bernard, running back 11 at 206. So buy or sell, let's just say 300. Let's go with the high number, Bloom. Buying or selling 300 touches for Gio Bernard this year in a some form of committee, mostly Gio, but Jeremy Hill's going to play a factor. How are fantasy owners navigating this, Bloom, and are you buying or selling the talk from Coach Caskey?
Yeah, I'm buying it, and I'm also buying it for Andre Ellington and C.J. Spiller. And I think that Spiller and Ellington are more explosive than Bernard. I know that Thursday night crazy run he did notwithstanding. I think all three of them are capable of being top 6 to 8 PPR fantasy running backs this year, and all look excellent to me as running back twos on your team. The difference is Bernard costs a second, Spiller and Ellington cost a third as of right now. So while I buy it, does that mean I'm buying Bernard? No. In the second round, I'm still targeting Gronkowski. Maybe I'm hoping for catching Marshawn Lynch while the holdout stain is still on him or something like that, because I know that in the third round, especially if I'm picking in the middle of the round and not late in the round, I'm very likely to get one of Spiller and Ellington.
Matt, buying or selling 300 touches for Gio Bernard?
Before that news, I had Bernard at 260 total touches, and then I have Jeremy Hill at 160, and I did that as a plan to kind of hedge a bit and be conservative about Bernard, because while I'm not a big Jeremy Hill fan, and I'm kind of find it curious that they would not give the ball more to Giovanni Bernard. I do understand that they want to have a change of pace back in certain situations. And Bernard, this is a very pivotal season for his career and for fantasy owners, because when I looked at Bernard out of school, to me it was, is he Brian Westbrook or is he more towards Ray Rice? Because he's somewhere in between that. And if he leans more towards Ray Rice, then I can see the 300 touches per year for him, and then you see basically Jeremy Hill as a change of pace guy, just to break the glass just in case sort of guy. But if he's more Brian Westbrook, then suddenly you have Jeremy Hill being Correll Buckhalter, and then that becomes something where maybe once or twice in his career, if Hugh Jackson goes by the wayside and they bring in a guy who actually throws the ball downfield and throws the ball a lot, then you're going to see probably more opportunities for somebody with Giovanni Bernard's skill set to be a high-end PPR threat and have those top 5 seasons like Brian Westbrook did in his peak seasons, which weren't that many in terms of top 5. But then Ray Rice, you look at him, and for over the first 4 to 5 years, he was certainly a guy that you would pick in your top 5. So looking at all this right now, I mean, the fact that they want to get him 300 touches is a really good sign. It says that they're probably leaning more towards that Ray Rice look, but I don't think it's quite there. I mean, I still think it's probably more you're going to look at him as that kind of tweener. So I may bump him up a little bit and say, let's say 280 now. But again, that makes him still a mid-second round pick for me. And while I'm not a big C.J. Spiller fan in the way that Bloom is, I am an Andre Ellington fan, and I could see taking either of those guys or taking some wide receivers and waiting and just taking good old Alfred Morris and letting him pound it, because I know what he's going to get.
Good old Alfred Morris. By the way, Chris Thompson in Washington, as we transition to Washington, having some trouble in some pass pro. Not surprising when you're not 200 pounds, but we'll talk now about the quarterback situation in Washington. Robert Griffin III, in an interview, and I don't know if it was Sirius or some other national outlet, but in an interview, Robert Griffin took a little dig, I believe, at Mike Shanahan, and said how, well, in a real offense, you're not going to rely on the spread option and run it around there. The numbers for Andy Dalton under Jay Gruden. We've talked about him a zillion times. Andy Dalton has more touchdowns in the first 3 years of his pro career than everybody but Peyton Manning and Dan Marino. That's pretty damn good company. What about RG3? What about this setup that they have now? A healthy Jordan Reed. Let's say that, because things are a little bit different when you don't have a healthy Jordan Reed. But Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, Andre Roberts, they can go vertical all day long. And then they can, punch it up the gut with an Alfred Morris, use a Roy Halou as a change of pace receiver out of the backfield. Let's see if Lake Seastrunk can catch, because he had more drops than catches in college. But when RG3 says this, the Shanahan slam to the side, Bloom, are you buying or selling? Because people love to overreact, and I believe forget. And good thing in this interview, Bloom, Robert Griffin III did remind everybody of what he did and winning the Heisman and how he did it. And the offense that he ran at Baylor which was a lot of passing, a lot of long passing, a lot of vertical routes. We know that we praised him to have the best bucket accuracy in his draft class. And it seems like fantasy owners are getting it about right. Quarterback 702 for RG3. There is a small segment, Bloom, that's all worried, though, about him maybe not being as valuable for fantasy because he's not going to be running as much. He can make plays with his arm. He can make plays from a standalone, stand in one spot, can't move out of this circle pocket. He can make plays. Just give him a little bit of time, let those routes develop. So buying or selling, the impact of some saying this is going to be horrible if he's not running that option.
No, I'm selling it because look what Jay Gruden did with Andy Dalton as a fantasy quarterback. And remember what RG3 was dealing with in 2012 was no Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon for only half the year, not 100% that half of the year. No, nothing like Jordan Reed. No one like Andre Roberts. Remember, we were watching him put together a very good passing season, throwing to the likes of Aldrick Robinson and Leonard Hankerson, Josh Morgan. So no, I think that he, because of the matchups, because even if he doesn't have designed runs, he still has a chance to break big plays as a scrambler. And in general, he is going to be, again, what does Jay Gruden do? He's going to put the quarterback at the center of the offensive game plan. I think that RG3 is right there with Nick Foles as a quarterback, that if I'm going to take a quarterback in the top 8 or 9 and not be one of the last to take a quarterback in my league, it will be for RG3 or Foles.
Matt Waldman, set these people straight about RG3 as a passer.
Yeah, just take a look at my little signature line here. RG3 is a passer. Mike Shanahan is a past coach. That's basically what we're looking at here. Because if you look at last season, it was basically max protect. Let's have him do really simple things where basically the defense knew what was coming and the offense couldn't stop them. And basically Robert Griffin was playing the stunt dummy. And that was basically what was going on. And I honestly think, and I talked about this before, I actually think that Washington's coaching staff, it wasn't intentional, but I think that they dumbed down the offense for Robert Griffin. Robert Griffin is an extremely intelligent man who showed a lot of potential as a passer. I think he compared very well from a physical skills to his accuracy, to the way that he hung in the pocket, to players like Aaron Rodgers. Now, he wasn't Aaron Rodgers, but then again, Aaron Rodgers wasn't Aaron Rodgers coming out. He was a good player, a little bit cocky, but he had a lot of development to do. And he had 3 years sitting on an NFL sideline to learn behind one of the best. I think that Robert Griffin was the type of player that they said, look, he can run. He's a fantastic athlete. Let's exploit that early. Make it simple so we can get him on the field and we can win fast. And I think that Daniel Snyder is a type of owner that wants to win fast because he was playing all these one-year fantasy deals, signing people like Brandon Lloyd and the rest of all these players from the get-go when he came aboard, trying to make splash signings, splash moves, and all he's done is basically tread water since he's been there. So I think that this was the type of motivation to say, look, Daniel Snyder, get me back in the league. I'm going to make you a winner right away because I know this is what you want to hear. So let's go ahead and get a simplistic offense in there that is going to be a good one in terms of the skills, in terms of a fit short term. But long term, you look at Steve McNair, Donovan McNabb, Steve Young. You look at any player that was able to run extremely well in the league, for them to make that next step to becoming a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, they needed to be able to throw the ball downfield and hang in the pocket. Griffin could do that, but when you are basically playing max protect and teams still don't care about your pass protection and still force you around and you're on a bum knee and you shouldn't have played for half the season anyway, then you're basically screwed. And that's what happened to him. And this year, I think that they finally got a real offense in there that's going to allow him to grow, challenge him to grow as a quarterback mentally. And he's more than capable of being able to handle that. And I think that they set him a year back because of what they did with this offense. Even though they won early, it wasn't good for his long-term development. So I'm hopeful that he'll rebound. I do think that he's still going to be able to run. They're going to still allow him to. I'm sure they're going to let him him roll out. I'm sure they're going to ask him to create. Michael Vick didn't need the spread to be able to be an 800, 700-yard rusher in Atlanta. Now he had Dan Reeves, who had 3 plays. But still, again, he did drop back, and it wasn't some option sort of offense.
There we go. He's Matt Waldman, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone else get the feeling that Dr. Gene's like our chaperone? Like he's sitting there waiting patiently, and if we say anything, he can jump in, saucy Q, or sorry Joe, or something. I mean, Gene, are you infiltrating? Have you infiltrated the Audible so Joe could keep a better hold on us, tighter rein on us?
No, not at all.
All right, I just had to ask. Time for Twitter questions. Gene, I'm going to let you ask all the questions, one for each of us, and then we'll pick somebody to ask you a question. So hashtag Audible Live. Dr. Gene, you get to throw them out to each one of us. We're going to pick one for Sigmund. I want you to pick one for Matt, one for me, and then we'll randomly, rock, paper, scissors, one to ask you here on the Audible Live. Hashtag Audible Live on Twitter. And again, to follow us on Twitter, the show is at The Audible. Sigmund is at Sigmund Bloom. Matt is at Matt Waldman. I'm at Cecil Lammy. And Gene is at Gene Bramall. So, Dr. Gene, when you're ready, fire away with a question for one of us 3.
All right, sounds good. That's what I was doing the last couple of minutes. I was just scrolling through. We got a lot of good questions tonight. Cecil, I'm going to start with you. And this one was kind of directed at you from Scott McLean. He wants to know which wide receiver is most likely to break out and get into the top 20 this season. Do you like Justin Hunter, Kenny Stills, Marcus Wheaton, or Marquise Lee?
Stills, Wheaton, or Marquise Lee. I'd let my
Justin
heart
Hunter.
Justin Hunter. My heart says Wheaton, but my brain says Stills. Now he's got to be healthy, but I look at the more robust passing game, and yeah, Todd Haley is a scourge of the NFL. And even though I appreciate Marcus Wheaton and what he can do, there's a little bit of complication there with how much they're going to use a Dre Archer, a Lance Moore, a Martavis Bryant there as well, opposite downtown Antonio Brown. And we know that offense, look at Emmanuel Sanders, never had a 100-yard game, never had a 1,000-yard season, and he was healthy the last 2 years. It's just that role. It's all Brown and a little bit for everybody else. So even though I would love to say Marcus Wheaton because I love his route running ability and the ability to grab contested passes, I'm going to say Kenny Stills. In that offense, again, you look at an aging Marcus Colston. You've got Jimmy Graham. You're always going to see single coverage for Stills. And with that downfield ability and ability to track passes over his shoulder, I love the high-powered nature of what he could be. And we've seen fantasy relevance, for the love of God, from Robert Meacham in that offense. Kenny Stills is much more well-rounded than Meacham was back in the day, 2009 or whatever that was. So Kenny Stills is my answer there over Marquise Lee, because we don't know which version of Marquise Lee we're going to get yet. Reports are very positive, by the way, about Marquise Lee, about Allen Robinson. Although Robinson got banged up today, Bloom, we have our newswire. We're keeping track of that for you. Sign up for our free daily newsletter. And then Justin Hunter there, well, that's lots of question marks there as well. So give me Stills in that Saints offense. Dr. Gene, another one for Bloom or Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to extend this question to these guys as well. I've got a couple other ones for you guys, but I think it would be between Stills and Hunter for me. I'm seeing a fair amount of buzz on Twitter for Hunter. Either Matt or Sig want to take the Hunter side of that equation versus Stills, or both of you guys feel like Stills is the guy to target there?
Well, I'll just
Hunter.
go ahead, Matt.
No, you go ahead on Hunter.
Well, I'm going to put on my lawyer hat here and speechify some fancy words. Now, Hunter's the guy, let's put it this way. Alshon Jeffrey, Josh Gordon, right? I mean, that's what we're looking for. Justin Hunter's the one who has the athletic profile to match them. Now, does he have the quarterback? Well, Gordon didn't last year either. Is he somebody who's shown us the foundation? Well, Jeffrey didn't really show us the foundation that much. Gordon more so. So I think that what we know about Justin Hunter is he has very, very rare ability. Can he put it together? Are the surroundings there? I'm not sure, but he has the highest ceiling of this group. That much is undisputed.
Okay, let's move up a little bit of a tier. What I think is probably a tier jump. Matt, I'm going to send this one for you. At Horn 2001, Bro Cephas wants to know, in a 12-team PPR, what round does Emmanuel Sanders become a reach in? And if you're not a big fan of Emmanuel Sanders as a wide receiver 3++ type player, are there a couple of other guys that you'd insert in that area to where you'd say, and I'm thinking you're probably thinking 4th or 5th round is probably getting into the reach territory for Emmanuel Sanders. Who might you put in that category instead of Sanders?
Yeah, that's a good question because I have Sanders ranked, his ADP was 72, which is kind of the end of the 6th round right now in a lot of leagues. In a 12-team PPR, that would be the case. And I have him valued as really an early 6th round pick. And he's in the same tier with guys like Kendall Wright. I would also say that Golden Tate would be a little bit of a value in the 6th round if you can get him there, even though his ADP is actually a full round and 4 picks lower than Emmanuel Sanders. So you're looking at that range there. So if you're going to go up to get him, and I can certainly understand why. I mean, Cecil's talked about Sanders and what he's been doing, and you have to like what he can do with Peyton Manning and all the talent around him. But then you have to wonder about Cody Lattimore. And you have to wonder about whether the Cody Lattimore Express is going to run over the Emmanuel Sanders, buzz that we've had here. I don't think it is, but I think that certainly you're going to see a little bit more time from Lattimore. And if Sanders gets hurt like he's been hurt in the past at times, he could lose that job and it be kind of a little bit more of a permanent thing, except for the fact that again, we're talking about an inexperienced player that is making great plays, it sounds like, in camp. But as we know about the Denver Broncos secondary, it has some things that it needs to address. So maybe great plays against the Broncos secondary isn't the same as maybe great plays against the Seahawks secondary. Now that's just my little jab at Cecil because I'm having fun tonight. But really, when it comes down to this, Sanders, to me, if you're going to look at him in the 5th because you like him that much, I don't think there's any problem with looking at him in the 5th. But alternatives to me, in that range that you're looking at here are probably Torrey Smith, who, again, now is going to have Steve Smith on the other side, a real receiver that I would say is a full-fledged, all-around type of player who can also go deep on you, even though he's no longer the one-man gang he once was. Then you also have guys like, maybe Deshaun Jackson. If you like that situation, that probably might be worthwhile to you. And I think that those are type of players that you could consider at that range and say maybe that's an alternative. You're also looking at Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace certainly was pretty good last year, despite the fact that maybe there were a lot of people who were disappointed with his splash that he made. But there, statistically, there were some good moments with him. And then you still have Marcus Colston, who good old reliable. I don't know, to me, you're going to have him in a pure quarterback situation, with an offense that is capable of matching or exceeding what the Broncos have done. That's what you have with the Saints, even with some of those young players. So to me, those are your options. I still like Sanders here, but the more I hear about Lattimore, the more I wonder, and it's got me kind of at a point where, he's holding steady. He's not someone who's climbing.
Welker comes off the field when Lattimore comes in.
Good to know.
Welker comes off the field. And you talk about injuries. Sanders that was 2 years ago. Welker was last year with the brain pain coach and the big dark helmet, from Spaceballs. So, and the future of this team, I talked to Mike Kliss today. He said, people need to pump the brakes a little bit on Lattimore. He's expecting about 30 catches, but maybe 7 touchdowns. So there's some certainly fantasy numbers to be worked with there. But just so that people know, the future of this team is Welker by Sanders slot, and this is only the second year Sanders has played on the outside. So Sanders goes into the slot, and Lattimore starts on the outside next year. They may preview that a little bit of it this year. So,
and I have Welker below Sanders in my tier anyway at this point. So that's kind of good to hear too.
All right, so that leaves Bloom. And Bloom, this is a question that I've been confronted with. I'm just starting the mock process. I've been in 3 or 4 different mocks over the past couple of weeks. I know you've been mocking for a long period of time, so you're a little bit ahead of me on this. And I'm going to make this into a 2-part question. This is from Chris Morgan at Fantasy Sophist. He wants to know if there's any value in a refocused Kenny Britt. And I want you to take this in a couple of different directions. As I go through my tiers, I don't really have that. My tiers aren't low enough in the wide receivers yet to really have Kenny Britt slotted. But each time I go and I compare the running backs to the wide receivers to the tight ends to the quarterbacks, and if I'm doing IDPs, Kenny Britt seems to be bubbling up to the top, and I can't really make myself pull the trigger. I don't know if you feel that way necessarily, if there's a point right now at which you take Kenny Britt, and if there isn't, is there something that you would see during camp over the next couple of weeks that would bump him up high enough on your tiers to make him a viable wide receiver 5 or even better for you?
Yeah, and Kenny Britt is the kind of player that I usually am enamored with at the end of my draft because Cecil's. We got a nice close up there of Cecil with some sort of toothpick, the knife. See, I'm just. Sorry, this is the problem with video.
Can't 3, 2, 1 that one.
No, we can't do that.
I thought it was a personal grooming device when I first looked at it, and then I realized it had a sharp end to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem with Britt is this, and I'm usually attracted to a player like Britt late in my draft because we've seen pre-ACL tear that he can be dominant, truly dominant, like Josh Gordon, Calvin Johnson, dominant. He was for a couple of games there, but he hasn't come close to it, and there's any number of reasons to think he'll never get back there, both physical and mental. So I still like rolling the dice on a guy like that. The other problem here is this. It's St. Louis. It's the St. Louis passing game, okay? They have Britt and Cook and Austin. Bailey will be back after 4 games. Brian Quick, maybe he's back too. They love to run the ball when they get the game on the script they want anyway. So I think even if Britt has somewhat regained his form, I'm not sure how that's going to translate to numbers. I have Britt in a tier that I call lottery tickets. These are guys, this is right above the waiver wire watch list group. I put my wide receiver tiers out today. And I think these are all players that have the talent to be an impact player, but they don't necessarily have the situation right off the bat to do it. It's Kenny Britt, Marcus Wilson, Andre Holmes, Odell Beckham, and Marquise Lee. And I have Rod Streeter down there right now while, I think he's back after a concussion after 4 days. But still, I don't like seeing he's had 2 concussions in the last 2 preseasons. My point is these are all players that you may reserve that one last roster spot for. And I'll say this much for Kenny Britt and his appeal compared to the rest of that group. Marcus Wilson is a number 3 receiver. Holmes, as long as Streeter's a number 3 receiver. Streeter's on Oakland with Matt Schaub. Odell Beckham is a rookie who's slow out of the gate. Marquise Lee is still a rookie, and I think that, Chad Henne. And honestly, it's not a good thing if Cecil Schwartz is hurt because Marquise Lee, as a rookie, is going to be the focal point of coverages. As we just said, Allen Robinson's hurt. So I do think that because Stedman Bailey is out for the first 4 games, you will know what you have in Britt pretty early. Now, it may translate to stats like 3 catches for 68 yards and not necessarily starter-worthy fantasy games, but if he flashes what he has done in the past, then you want to hold on to him to see what happens. I still think that the Rams passing game is not exactly fertile soil to grow your sleeper wide receivers, but I will say you'll know what you have in him early. So I would endorse taking him in the 15th or 16th round, but I feel like he's one of those players at this point that he has to show us something before we invest more than that.
And there we go. Matt, I want Zook to jump on a Matt and to pick a question. We need like a jump to conclusions, Matt, for Zook, so that you can set him up and then he can jump, and then that's the question that you ask. So
I'm telling you,
we need to make it happen. A new game here on the Audible. I want a question from you for Dr. Gene to tie a bow on tonight's show, Matt.
Let's do that. And obviously, I just want to say the minute he mentioned Brian Quick and Kenny Britt, it was the first time that Zook just jumped into the screen here. I'm telling you, guys, that fresh fish is basically his deal. He jumps up for that. So let's go and look at players that will probably make him jump down and leave. CSIMO would like to know Michael Kendrick or C.J. Mosley long term.
That's a good question. I'm a big Michael Kendricks fan. I always have been. I was a little bit disappointed in the way he started his career, but I think toward the end of last year he started perking up a little bit. But if you're looking for fantasy value, I think C.J. Mosley may have a little bit better overall value in the longer term, simply because I think he's got a chance to be a little bit better in coverage. Now, what Kendricks has working for him is some pass rush upside, and he's got some pretty good delayed and interior blitzing ability. And if the Eagles allow him to do that, and that defense gives him the chance to do that, then Kendricks might be the guy here. I think it's going to be pretty close. I can see why you're asking the question. I think if long-term means over the next 12 months, and that's stretching the definition of long-term, obviously, I think I'd take Kendricks. But I think over the long term, Mosley probably plays a little bit longer. He's probably a little bit more stable. He's definitely got the better stat crew for now in Baltimore in terms of folks getting more assists than what we see in Philadelphia. So Kendricks may make us change our mind pretty quickly if he gets off to a hot start. DeMeco Ryans played so well last year that he kind of limited Kendricks' upside. If that switches around this year and Kendricks takes over and Ryans loses a quarter step and Kendricks is able to make more plays within the tackles, then this call is going to look bad. But I think even though it's, as Bob Harris likes to say, the optimism of the unknown a little bit, I think I'll take Mosley over Kendricks today, even though I'm a big Kendricks fan.
And there you have it. That is a wrap for tonight's program. I just want the court to recognize that Bloom gets distracted when things are in my mouth, and that is something that we'll have to finish on tonight, and I love making Bloom smile. So, Sigmund, some final thoughts, parting shots here tonight.
It's gone. I mean, it's getting going now. Our boards are in motion. We're tracking injuries. We're tracking players on the upswing. We're watching our deep sleepers. We're recording preseason watch list episodes every day. Preseason football is coming up this weekend. It's coming, man. Right now it's finger in the light socket. That's going to be like two hands in the light socket, toe, and it's just going to be electrified.
Be careful when you start fingering and then have to reset.
No. Saucy Q.
Makes the imagination wander. Matt, your final thoughts for tonight, brother.
Man, just a good time as always. I'm all about that action, boss. I think that's probably more all it is.
He's back.
And Dr. Gene, our chaperone, the ever watchful eye of Big Brother Bramble. Final thoughts, brother.
You're not going to get a better chaperone than somebody that knows how to bring you some saucy Q. So last Thursday without football for a long time. Last weekend without football for a long time. So buckle up, get ready. It's going to be a fun ride.
Oh, it is a beautiful thing. It is the National Football League. It is fantasy football, and that's why we love it and enjoy it. So we thank everyone out there for watching, for listening on the Audible, for checking us out on iTunes, and, giving us the old 5-star rating and comment if you'd like. We appreciate that as always. And again, follow all of us on Twitter at The Audible, at Sigmund Bloom, at Matt Waldman, at Gene Bramall, at Cecil Lammy, saying thanks much, stay tuned, and as always, I command that you stay frosty.